The dog pulled the farmer toward the well. What was inside changed his life forever. Robert James Wilson jolted awake when Max, his German shepherd, began barking desperately in the yard. It was still early morning on his rural property near Lake Tahoe in the countryside of California, and this barking was anything but normal. The dog was scratching forcefully at the porch door, alternating between looking at Robert and running toward the back of the property. Max had never behaved like this in the 5 years since his wife Emily had passed, leaving him alone in that house that was once full of life and hope. "What is it, boy?" Robert murmured, still half asleep, but already sensing something was wrong. Max bolted toward the old stone well at the edge of the property, the same well that had been built by Robert's grandfather decades ago. The dog stopped there, barking incessantly and staring into the circular structure of stacked stones. Then Robert heard it, a faint sound almost imperceptible in the cold morning wind. A cry, a baby's cry. Robert's heart raced. For a moment he thought he was dreaming, that loneliness had finally taken its toll on his mind. But Max kept barking, growing more anxious by the second, and the crying persisted. With trembling hands, Robert approached the edge of the well and looked down. About 10 feet below, he could make out a bundle of blankets, and from that bundle came the cry echoing against the stone walls. "My God," he whispered, his legs shaking. Without hesitation, Robert ran to the shed and grabbed the strongest rope he had. He tied one end to the iron support of the well and quickly climbed down, ignoring the pain in his back from years of hard labor. When he reached the bottom, his hands found a baby wrapped in clean blankets, though they were already damp from the well's moisture. The child couldn't have been more than a few days old. Next to the blankets was a small folded note. Robert carefully picked up the baby and wrapped her in his own coat before climbing back up. Max was still barking, but now he seemed less frantic, as if he knew his mission was complete. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Once inside, his hands still shaking, Robert lit the lantern and examined the child more closely. It was a baby girl, seemingly healthy but clearly in urgent need of care. The note was damp but still legible. The handwritten words were simple and desperate. "Please, take care of her. She deserves love." Robert felt a lump in his throat. For 5 years since Emily had passed during the birth of their first child, he had lived in a mechanical routine, tending only to the animals and the small crops he maintained. The loss of Emily and their baby had left a void in his soul that he thought would never be filled. Now here was a child, abandoned in the same well where he fetched water every morning, a ritual he'd kept since childhood. It couldn't be a coincidence. The baby was hungry. Robert searched the house for something to help. He remembered he had goats in the barn and that their milk could be diluted to feed the little one. With clumsy but careful movements, he managed to give the baby a few drops of warm milk, and she seemed to settle. As she slept in his arms, Robert studied her delicate face. She had light green eyes and dark hair, and something about her features felt familiar, though he couldn't place why. Dawn came quickly, and Robert knew he had to go into town to get proper supplies to care for the child. He couldn't simply ignore what had happened, but he also couldn't imagine handing her over to the authorities without at least trying to understand how she had ended up there. In town, Robert went straight to Mr. Richards' pharmacy, a discreet man he had known for decades. He bought powdered milk suitable for babies, diapers, and other essential items. He tried to be discreet, but he knew that in a small town like that, any unusual purchase would be noticed. "Unexpected visitor, Robert?" asked Mr. Richard, eyeing the unusual products. "You could say that," Robert replied, avoiding details. But as he left the pharmacy, Robert bumped into Barbara Thompson, the mayor's wife, a woman known for her sharp tongue and ability to spread gossip across the entire town in a matter of hours. "Robert James, what a surprise to see you buying these things," said Barbara, eyeing the bag with obvious curiosity. "Don't tell me you finally got a girlfriend and she already came with a gift." Robert felt his blood boil. Barbara had always been intrusive, but now her curiosity seemed especially ill-timed. They're for some kittens that showed up on the property, Robert lied, trying to end the conversation. Kittens? With baby formula and diapers? Barbara laughed scornfully. Do you think I was born yesterday, Robert James? Before Robert could respond, Barbara was already walking away, clearly excited at the prospect of having fresh gossip to spread. Robert knew it wouldn't be long before the whole town knew he had bought baby supplies. Back at the property, Robert found the baby crying again. Max was lying beside the makeshift crib Robert had put together with drawers and blankets, as if standing guard. As he fed the child, Robert couldn't stop thinking about the note. Who had left the baby there? Why specifically in his well? And why had Max reacted so instinctively, as if he knew exactly where to look? The questions multiplied in his mind when he heard the sound of a car approaching. Through the window, he saw the official town pickup truck parking in front of the gate. Barbara Thompson stepped out, accompanied by two other women Robert recognized as part of the town's morality committee, an informal group that made it their business to interfere in everyone's lives. "Robert James," Barbara called out, clapping her hands to get his attention. "We need to talk." Robert picked up the baby and went to the porch, not inviting the visitors inside. Max positioned himself at his side, clearly wary of the women. "What can I do for you?" Robert asked, keeping his tone polite but distant. "We know you're hiding a child here," Barbara said bluntly. "A single man can't take care of a baby. It's inappropriate and possibly illegal." "Illegal?" Robert raised an eyebrow. "Since when is helping a child in need illegal?" "You should have turned her over to the authorities immediately," one of the other women interjected. "There are proper procedures to follow." Robert studied the expressions of the three women carefully. There was something beyond moral concern on their faces. Barbara, in particular, seemed nervous, avoiding direct eye contact with the baby. "The child is well cared for," Robert replied calmly, "and I won't hand her over to anyone until I'm sure it's for the best." "That's not your decision to make." Barbara raised her voice, showing agitation that seemed disproportionate to the situation. "Why are you so interested in this child?" Robert asked, noticing how Barbara flinched slightly at the question. "We care about the well-being of all children in our community," one of the women answered, but her voice sounded rehearsed. Robert realized they knew more than they were letting on. Barbara's insistence, in particular, seemed to have motivations that went beyond what she claimed. "You have until tomorrow to hand over the child," said Barbara, trying to assert her authority. "Otherwise, we'll take the necessary measures." After the women left, Robert grew even more puzzled. Their reaction had been too strange to be just ordinary concern. There was urgency, nervousness, and especially from Barbara, something that seemed almost guilt. That afternoon, Robert decided to take the baby to the town's veterinarian, Dr. Michael Carter, a respected and discreet man who had cared for the area's animals for over 20 years. Robert trusted him and knew that, as a doctor, Michael could at least check if the child was healthy. "My God, Robert!" exclaimed Dr. Michael when he saw the baby. "Where did this child come from?" Robert told the whole story, from Max's barking to the visit from the townswomen. Michael listened carefully, examining the baby with care. "She's healthy," said Michael after the checkup. "Very well cared for, in fact. This isn't a neglected child. Someone took very good care of her before, leaving her where you found her." "That means she wasn't just abandoned due to lack of resources," Robert observed. "Exactly. This child was given up by someone who wanted her to be found. Specifically by you," said Michael thoughtfully. "The location of the well, the fact that Max reacted. Someone knows your habits, Robert." Michael paused, as if deciding whether or not to share something. "Robert, I need to tell you something. Last night when I was coming back from an emergency at the Johnson farm, I saw someone walking near your property. It was a woman, but I couldn't make out who it was." "A woman?" Robert felt a chill. "Yes, and there was something familiar about her silhouette, but it was too dark to be sure. She was coming from the direction of your well." This changed everything. It hadn't been a random abandonment. Someone had specifically chosen Robert's well, knowing his morning routine. That night, Robert barely slept. The baby rested peacefully in the makeshift crib, but his mind raced with questions. Max also seemed restless, getting up several times to check the windows. Around 2 in the morning, Max began to growl softly. Robert got up quietly and looked out the kitchen window. There was a shadow moving near the well, and the full moon made it clear it was a person. Robert grabbed a flashlight and went out the back door, staying in the shadows. He got close enough to see it was a young woman kneeling by the well, apparently crying. When she stood up to leave, the moonlight briefly lit her face. Robert almost gasped in surprise. It was Jessica Thompson, the mayor's daughter, who everyone thought had been studying in the capital for months. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Robert stayed hidden until Jessica disappeared into the darkness, his mind now connecting dots that had previously seemed meaningless. Barbara's desperate reaction, the insistence on taking the child, the fact that no one had seen Jessica in town for months. The next morning, Robert decided to visit Mrs. Margaret Williams, the retired nurse who lived in a small house on the outskirts of town. Margaret had worked at the health clinic for decades before retiring and was known for her discretion and wisdom. Mrs. Williams, Robert said after explaining the situation, could you take a look at the baby? I want to make sure she's all right. Margaret, a grey-haired woman with kind eyes, picked up the child with the experience of someone who had cared for hundreds of babies in her lifetime. She's beautiful, she murmured, examining the baby carefully. And very healthy. This birthmark on her arm, it's quite distinctive. Birthmark. Robert looked closer. Yes, here on her left arm. See this little mark shaped like a crescent moon? It's very rare, this specific shape. Margaret continued examining the baby, but her expression gradually changed. She turned pale and her hands began to tremble slightly. What's wrong, Mrs. Williams? Robert asked, concerned. This mark, she murmured, almost to herself. It can't be. Do you recognize this mark? Margaret looked at Robert with the expression of someone facing an inner dilemma. After a few moments of silence, she took a deep breath. Robert, can I trust you? This information must not leave this house. Of course, Mrs. Williams, you know you can trust me. I've seen this mark before, exactly the same. On the arm of another child I helped bring into the world many years ago. How many years? 17. It was the daughter of the Thompsons, Jessica. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Robert felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. Are you saying that... I'm saying this baby has the same hereditary birthmark as Jessica Thompson, a mark that runs in the family. And if this child has it, considering the circumstances, Jessica is the mother, Robert finished, feeling all the pieces fall into place. Margaret nodded gravely. But that means... Where has she been all these months? And why did no one know she was pregnant? Robert, you need to understand something about the Thompson family. They're obsessed with reputation. If they'd found out Jessica was pregnant and unmarried, they'd have done anything to hide it. Even force her to abandon her own child. Especially that, Margaret replied, sadness in her voice. Robert ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. The baby he was caring for was the granddaughter of Barbara Thompson, the same woman desperate to take her away. Now he understood the urgency, the nervousness, the insistence. Mrs. Williams, did you help deliver her? Not officially, but... She hesitated. Jessica showed up at my house one night in labor, said her parents didn't know, begged me to help her. How could I refuse a child in need? And after the birth, she took the baby away, said she had a plan, that she'd find a way to care for her. I never imagined the plan would be this. Robert looked at the baby, sleeping peacefully in his arms. The courage Jessica must have had to make this decision, choosing to leave her daughter where she knew she'd be found and cared for, rather than handing her over to the system, or worse, to her own parents. Why did she choose my well, Mrs. Williams? Maybe because you're the only person in this town she knew would give unconditional love to a child. Your story with Emily is known to everyone. Jessica must have realized you'd understand the value of a new life. At that moment, Robert made a decision that would change his life forever. He wouldn't give up the baby. Not to the Thompsons, not to the authorities, not to anyone who wouldn't show genuine love and care for her. Mrs. Williams, I need your help. I won't let them take this child. Robert, you must understand the consequences. The Thompsons have power in this town. They can make your life very difficult. Let them try. But this baby won't grow up without love. Not if I can help it. Margaret smiled for the first time since the conversation began. You know, Robert, your Emily would be proud of your decision. She always said you would be a wonderful father. Mentioning Emily brought a sharp pain to Robert's chest, but also a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Maybe this child hadn't come into his life by chance. Maybe it was the redemption he didn't even know he was searching for. That afternoon, Robert was feeding the baby when he heard cars approaching. Through the window he saw 3 vehicles: the town hall's pickup truck, the Thompsons' personal car, and a van he didn't recognize. Barbara Thompson stepped out of the car, visibly upset, accompanied by Mayor William Thompson, a short, stocky man known for his arrogance and questionable methods of running the town. 2 large men Robert didn't know got out of the van. "Robert James!" shouted William Thompson before even reaching the porch. "We know you're illegally sheltering a child. Hand her over now." Robert stepped outside with the baby in his arms, Max by his side, growling softly. "Good morning, Mayor. I didn't know caring for a child in need was illegal." "Don't get smart with me, Robert," William pointed a threatening finger. "This child must be handed over to the proper authorities. You have no legal right to keep her here." "And who would those authorities be?" Robert asked calmly. "Did you bring a social worker? A representative from Child Services?" The question clearly unsettled William, who glanced quickly at the 2 men he'd brought. "We are the local authority," said William, "and we've determined this child must be removed from this property immediately." "Under what legal authority?" Robert pressed. It was then that Barbara lost her composure. "Enough of this nonsense," she shouted. "This child is our responsibility, and you have no right to interfere." "Your responsibility?" Robert raised an eyebrow. "Why are you so interested in an abandoned child?" The silence that followed was tense. William shot his wife a furious look, clearly annoyed by her slip-up. "We want what's best for all the children in our town," William said, trying to regain control. "Then why bring thugs instead of social workers?" Robert asked, eyeing the 2 large men who remained silent. The baby began to cry, perhaps sensing the tension in the air. Robert rocked her gently, and Max moved closer, clearly protecting both the man and the child. "Last chance, Robert," William said, his voice laced with threat. "Hand over the child or there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "Your property has several violations. We can easily find reasons for confiscation. Are your documents in order? Your taxes? Your environmental permits?" Robert felt anger rising, but kept his cool. He knew William was trying to intimidate him, but he also knew the mayor had ways to make his life very difficult. "And if I refuse?" "Then you'll find out I'm not a patient man," William replied, signaling for the 2 men to step forward. It was then that a woman's voice cut through the tension. "Stop!" someone shouted, running toward the group. Everyone turned to see Jessica Thompson sprinting up the road, still dressed in dark clothes, as if she'd just sneaked out of the house. "Jessica!" Barbara cried, visibly shocked. "What are you doing here? You should be where, Mom?" Jessica interrupted, breathless but determined. "Locked in the attic, pretending I don't exist." The mayor turned pale. "Jessica, go home right now. This is no place for you." "No place for me," Jessica laughed bitterly. "This is my daughter, Dad, my daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the 2 thugs seemed uncomfortable with the revelation. Robert looked at the young woman running toward him. She had the same green eyes as the baby, and now that he knew the truth, the resemblance was undeniable. "Jessica, don't make a scene," said Barbara, trying to sound calm but failing miserably. "Let's go home and talk about this." "Talk?" Jessica stopped in front of her parents, breathing heavily. "How did you talk when you found out I was pregnant? When you locked me in the house for months? When you forced me to lie to everyone?" "We were protecting you," said William, but his voice sounded less certain. "Protecting your reputation, you mean?" Jessica shot back. "You care more about what others think than your own daughter and granddaughter." Robert watched the scene with a mix of sadness and admiration. Jessica's courage in confronting her parents publicly showed a strength he hadn't expected from someone so young. "Jessica," Robert said softly, "are you this child's mother?" Jessica turned to him, tears in her eyes. "Yes, and I chose your well because I knew you would love her. I saw you every morning walking there, tending to your wife's grave with such care. I knew someone capable of that much love would take good care of my daughter." Jessica's confession moved Robert deeply. She had observed his grieving routine and seen in it not just sorrow, but the capacity to love. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" Robert asked. "Because my parents kept me practically imprisoned. Today was the first time I've left the house alone in months." William Thompson seemed to be losing control of the situation. "Enough of this nonsense," he shouted. "Jessica, you're coming home right now. And you, Robert, will hand over that child. This isn't up for debate." "Dad, I won't abandon my daughter again," Jessica said firmly. "You're a minor and under our responsibility," William retorted. "You have no choice." Just then, Mrs. Williams appeared, walking down the road, followed by Dr. Michael and several other townspeople drawn by the commotion. "William Thompson," Mrs. Williams said firmly, "you should be ashamed of yourself." "This is none of your business, Margaret," William replied, though clearly unsettled by the retired nurse's presence. "None of my business?" Mrs. Williams stepped closer. "I helped deliver this child. I saw this girl's courage facing childbirth alone because her own parents abandoned her when she needed support the most." Whispers spread among the gathered crowd. Gossip about the situation had already spread through town, and many had come to see for themselves what was happening. "Margaret, you don't know what you're talking about," Barbara said nervously. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. And I also know you forced your own daughter to hide a pregnancy for months, give birth alone, and then tried to make her abandon the baby." "Those are serious and baseless accusations," William said, but his voice betrayed his nerves. "Baseless?" Mrs. Williams turned to the crowd. "How many of you have seen Jessica in town these past months? Anyone?" The silence confirmed what everyone already suspected. "She was ill," Barbara tried to explain. "She was recovering from a health issue." "What health issue lasts 9 months and ends with a baby abandoned in a well?" Dr. Michael asked, joining the group. William Thompson realized he was losing control of the narrative. The townspeople's presence had turned what should have been a simple retrieval of the child into a public exposure of his family's secrets. "All of you need to disperse immediately," William said, trying to assert authority. "This is a private matter for the Thompson family." "Private," called a voice from the crowd. "Trying to intimidate an honest man like Robert James isn't a private matter." Other voices joined in support of Robert. Over the years, he had helped many people in town, lending tools, assisting with harvests, caring for animals. His reputation as an honest, hard-working man now served as his protection. "Robert James is a good man," said another resident. "If he's taking care of that child, it's because she needs care. And we all know he'd be an excellent father," added an elderly woman. "His Emily always said so." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The mention of Emily brought tears to Robert's eyes. Even years after her passing, she was still remembered fondly by the community. Jessica approached Robert, looking at the baby in his arms. "Can I hold her?" she asked, her voice trembling. Robert hesitated for a moment, glancing at the young woman's parents who looked ready to explode, but the pure love in Jessica's face convinced him. "Of course," he said, carefully passing the baby into her mother's arms. The moment Jessica held her daughter was pure emotion. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered sweet words to the child. "My little one," she murmured. "Mommy's here. Mommy will never leave you again." The scene was deeply moving for everyone present. Even some of the town's toughest residents had tears in their eyes, watching that young mother reunite with her child. William Thompson, realizing he was losing control of the situation, tried one last move. "Jessica, you're in no position to raise a child. You didn't even finish high school. You don't have a job. You don't have your own home. I can work, Jessica replied, not taking her eyes off her daughter. I can learn. I can try harder. What I can't do is abandon my child again. And where do you plan to live? How will you support a child? It was then that Robert made a decision that surprised even himself. She can stay on my property, he said. There's plenty of space, and I can help with the child. The silence that followed was heavy with tension and surprise. Robert, Mrs. Williams said softly, are you sure about this? I am. This child needs love and care. Jessica is her mother and has the right to be with her daughter. If she needs help, I can offer it. This is ridiculous, William exploded. A single man living with an underage girl, that's improper and possibly illegal. What's improper is forcing a daughter to hide a pregnancy and abandon a baby, Dr. Michael countered. Robert is offering genuine help, not coercion. Besides, Mrs. Williams added, Jessica turns 18 next week. She'll be a legal adult and can make her own decisions. This clearly caught William by surprise. He'd forgotten his daughter's birthday and the chaos of the past months. Even so, William said, trying to regain his argument, she doesn't have the means to support a child. Then maybe you should help your own daughter and granddaughter, a voice in the crowd suggested, instead of trying to tear the family apart. William turned red with anger. We won't accept this situation. Jessica is coming home now, and the child will be handed over to the proper authorities. No, Jessica said firmly. I'm not going back to that house, and my daughter stays with me. You have no choice, William shouted. She does, Robert intervened. Jessica is welcome on my property for as long as she needs, and anyone who tries to force her to do something against her will have to deal with me. Max, as if understanding the tension of the moment, positioned himself between Robert and Mr. Williams' henchman, growling softly. The situation was reaching a confrontation point when a police car arrived. Sergeant Sullivan, a respected officer in town, stepped out of the vehicle and observed the scene. What's going on here? He asked. William immediately stepped forward. Sergeant, this man is illegally keeping a child on his property and is now enticing my underage daughter. That's not true, Emily protested. I came here of my own free will to be with my daughter. Sergeant Sullivan looked around, taking in the expressions of those present. He knew the reputations of everyone involved and sensed there was more to the story than William was telling. Mr. Robert, said the sergeant, can you explain how this child came to be on your property? Robert recounted the entire story from the beginning, omitting only what he had discovered about the mother's true identity. He left it to Emily to reveal that information if she chose to. And Miss Emily, the sergeant said, turning to her, can you confirm this version? I can, Emily replied. And I can add that I am this child's mother and that I left her where I knew she would be found and cared for. Emily, Barbara shouted, don't say another word. Why not, Mom? Emily shot back. Do you really think hiding the truth will solve anything? Sergeant Sullivan nodded thoughtfully. I see. And what do you intend to do now, miss? I intend to care for my daughter, Emily said firmly, and to accept help from Mr. Robert, who is the only person who has shown genuine concern for my child's well-being. Sergeant, William interjected, my daughter is underage and is being influenced. I demand she be taken back home. Mayor, the sergeant said calmly, the young lady seems to be making her decisions consciously. And by law, a mother has rights over her own child, regardless of age, as long as she demonstrates the ability to care for them. But she doesn't have that ability, William insisted. From what I can see, the sergeant said, watching Emily tenderly holding the baby, she shows far more maternal capability than many people I know. The sergeant's statement was a bucket of cold water on William's hopes. The officer had a strong reputation for fairness and impartiality, and his opinion carried weight in the community. Is there any law preventing Mr. Robert from offering help to a mother in need? The sergeant asked. Well, not exactly, William admitted reluctantly. Then I don't see any crime being committed here. A young mother accepting help to care for her child seems perfectly legal, even commendable. William realized he had lost. The sergeant's presence, the community's support, and most of all, Emily's determination had made his position untenable. This isn't over, he said, pointing at Robert. You'll regret meddling in my family's affairs." "Mayor," the sergeant said firmly, "that sounded like a threat. I hope you don't intend to use your position to harass an honest citizen." William realized he had gone too far. With the sergeant present and several witnesses, any more explicit threat could have legal consequences for him. "Let's go, Barbara," he said abruptly. "We have nothing more to do here." Barbara hesitated, looking at Emily and her granddaughter with an expression mixing anger and what might have been regret. "Emily," she said finally, "if you change your mind—" "I won't," Emily replied, without looking at her mother. "For the first time in my life, I'm doing what's right." The Thompsons left accompanied by the henchmen, leaving behind a crowd of neighbors who gradually began to disperse, but not before greeting Robert and wishing Jessica luck. When they were finally alone, Robert, Jessica, the baby, and Max, a contemplative silence settled in. "Mr. Robert," Jessica finally said, "are you sure about what you're doing? My parents could make your life very difficult." "Jessica," Robert replied, "for the past 5 years my life has been empty, taking care of this child, helping you. It's the first thing that's made sense since I lost Emily. I don't want to be a burden. I can work, I can help on the property. You're not a burden, and neither is your daughter, but I need you to understand one thing. If you stay here, I'll treat this child as if she were my own grandchild. I'll love her, protect her, and do everything I can to give her a happy life." Jessica smiled through her tears. "That's exactly what I hoped for when I left her in your well." That night, Robert helped Jessica settle into the guest room that hadn't been used in years. It was simple, but clean and comfortable. He had improvised a crib for the baby using a large drawer lined with soft blankets. "What should I call you?" Jessica asked as she fed her daughter. "Robert is fine. We don't need formalities here." "And the baby? I still haven't given her a name." "Have you thought of one?" Jessica was thoughtful for a moment. "Hope," she finally said. "Through all these hard months, she was my only hope. Hope that something good could come from this terrible situation." "Hope," Robert repeated, smiling. "It's a perfect name." In the days that followed, Robert and Jessica developed a routine that worked surprisingly well. Jessica proved to be dedicated and capable, caring for Hope with natural love and helping with chores on the property whenever she could. Robert rediscovered the joy of having life in his home. The baby's cries, which once would have been a source of sadness, now gave him purpose. Teaching Jessica about the property gave him a sense of continuity he had lost. The town, initially divided about the situation, gradually began to accept and even admire the arrangement. Jessica's determination to care for her daughter and her gratitude for Robert's help earned the respect of many. However, William Thompson hadn't given up. He began a subtle campaign of sabotage, creating bureaucratic hurdles for Robert and spreading rumors about the improper situation on the property. The first retaliation came in the form of an unexpected health inspection. Town inspectors showed up, claiming they had received complaints about inadequate conditions for a child. Robert and Jessica received them calmly, confident there was nothing wrong. The property was clean, well kept, and clearly suitable for a family. "Where's the official crib for the child?" one inspector asked. "Here," Jessica replied, showing the makeshift crib Robert had made. "That's not an approved crib," the inspector said. "It could be considered unsafe for a baby." "It's safer than many cribs I've seen," Dr. Michael interjected, whom Robert had called when he heard about the inspection. "I've examined and approved its safety myself." "You're not a qualified inspector for this evaluation," the town official retorted. The inspection continued with a series of minor demands and nitpicks clearly meant to create problems. Robert knew William was behind it, but stayed calm. "Will you be filing a report?" Robert asked. "Yes, and we'll recommend necessary adjustments." "And if those adjustments aren't made?" "The child could be considered at risk." The threat was clear, but veiled. Robert knew he would have to play Robert's bureaucratic game if he wanted to protect his new family. After the inspectors left, Robert sat down with Jessica to discuss the situation. They'll make up anything to cause trouble, said Jessica, worried. Probably. But we also know the whole town is watching what's happening. Your father may have power, but he doesn't have the community's full support on this. What can we do? We'll make every adjustment they ask for, even the unnecessary ones, and we'll document everything. If they want to play dirty, at least we'll be prepared. Robert's strategy was wise. In the following weeks, he made all the required modifications, some truly necessary, others clearly excessive. He bought an approved crib, installed unnecessary safety gates, and even renovated parts of the house that were in perfect condition. Every change was photographed and documented. Robert was creating a record that would prove his good faith and willingness to cooperate while exposing the persecutory nature of the demands. During this time, Jessica also took steps to strengthen their position. She enrolled in an adult education course to finish high school and started working part-time on a neighbor's property, helping with animals. I need to prove I can support Hope, she explained to Robert. I don't want anyone saying we depend on charity. Jessica, accepting help isn't shameful, and you're already contributing so much here. I know, but I want my daughter to grow up knowing her mother fought for her, that she worked hard to give her the best. Jessica's determination impressed Robert daily. She had matured years in just weeks, transforming from a frightened teenager into a determined, responsible mother. Robert's second retaliation came in the form of pressure on local suppliers. Some merchants began making things difficult for Robert, claiming payment issues that had never existed before. The tactic was subtle but effective. Robert was using his influence to isolate Robert economically, hoping financial struggles would force him to reconsider the situation. Mr. Richard, Robert said at the pharmacy, is something wrong? You seem to be avoiding doing business with me. The pharmacist glanced around nervously before answering. Robert, you're a good man, but I have a family to support. I can't afford trouble with City Hall. What kind of trouble? Delayed permits, strict inspections, supplier issues. You understand. Robert understood perfectly. Robert was using his position to indirectly pressure anyone who did business with him. I understand, Mr. Richard. I won't cause problems for you. Leaving the pharmacy, Robert found Jessica waiting with Hope in her arms. Trouble, she asked, noticing his worried expression. Nothing we can't handle, but we might have to get creative with our shopping for a while. We can buy in the next town over, Jessica suggested. It's just an hour's drive. That's an option, but I don't like being forced into it. Walking down Main Street, they noticed some people greeted them normally, while others looked away. Robert's pressure was dividing the town. That's when Mrs. Williams approached them. Robert, Jessica, she said, can I talk to you? Of course, Mrs. Williams. I've heard about the trouble you're facing, and I want you to know you're not alone. What do you mean? Several people in town are upset with Robert's tactics. We're organizing a way to help you. Mrs. Williams, we don't want to cause more trouble for anyone, said Jessica. My dear, sometimes you have to stand up for what's right, and what William is doing isn't right. In the following days, an informal support network began forming around Robert and Jessica. Neighbors offered goods and services without going through local businesses. Some braver shopkeepers continued serving them normally, defying William's pressure. The situation reached a critical point when William tried using the municipal building code to demand Robert make expensive renovations to his property, claiming a child's presence required specific adjustments. This is ridiculous, said Dr. Michael, examining the list of requirements. These renovations would cost more than the entire property's value. That's exactly the point, Robert replied. He wants to force me to give up. And will you? Jessica asked, clearly worried. Robert looked at her and at Hope, sleeping peacefully in his arms. The child had grown these past weeks, developing her unique personality. Her little green eyes sparkled with curiosity, and she already smiled when she saw Robert approach. No, Robert said firmly. I won't give up, but we'll need help. The help came from an unexpected source. Sergeant Sullivan appeared at the property one afternoon, not on official duty, but as a concerned citizen. Robert, he said, I need to tell you something. William is pressuring the sheriff to open an investigation about your situation with Jessica. What kind of investigation? He's suggesting there might be something improper going on, A single man living with an underage girl. That's ridiculous, Jessica protested. I'm here by choice, taking care of my daughter. I know that and you know that, but William's a politician. He knows how to plant doubts and create scandals. What do you recommend? Robert asked. First, document everything. Every interaction, every help you give, every contribution Jessica makes. Second, consider formalizing the situation legally. How so? Shared adoption, legal guardianship, something that makes official what's already happening in practice. The sergeant's suggestion made sense, but also brought complications. Any legal process would involve William and Barbara as Jessica's parents and Hope's grandparents. That night, Robert and Jessica talked at length about their options. If we formalize the situation, Robert said, your parents will use it as an opportunity to create more problems. But if we don't, they'll use our informal arrangement against us, Jessica countered. Exactly. We're between a rock and a hard place. Robert, Jessica said hesitantly, there's another option. What? I could get married. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Married? To whom? To someone who'd accept the situation. Someone who'd love Hope and understand our story. Robert knew exactly who Jessica was thinking of, but didn't want to presume. Jessica, marriage is a very serious decision. It can't be just for convenience. It wouldn't be just for convenience, she said, looking into his eyes. Robert, these past weeks you've been more of a father to Hope than my own father ever was to me, and you've treated me with more respect and kindness than my parents ever showed. Jessica. Let me finish. I know you still love Emily. I'm not asking to replace her. But maybe we could build something different, based on mutual respect and love for Hope. Jessica's proposal left Robert deeply unsettled, not because he didn't care for her. On the contrary, he developed genuine affection for the young woman and admired her strength and determination. But the age difference, the circumstances, and most of all the love he still felt for Emily, made the situation complicated. I need to think about this, he finally said. Of course. I just wanted you to know it's an option. The following week, William's pressure intensified. Inspectors showed up again, this time accompanied by a social worker who had clearly been instructed to find problems. The interview with Jessica was particularly tense. How old are you? Asked the social worker. 17, but I'll be 18 in 2 weeks. And what exactly is your relationship with Mr. Robert? He's helping me take care of my daughter. In exchange for what? The question was clearly biased, implying there should be some inappropriate arrangement. In exchange for nothing, Jessica replied firmly. He's being kind and generous. And where do you sleep? In the guest room. And your daughter? With me in the crib Robert set up for her. The social worker took constant notes, clearly searching for something that could be interpreted negatively. When it was Robert's turn to be interviewed, the questions were even more direct. Why did you agree to shelter an underage pregnant girl? She wasn't pregnant when she arrived here. She came looking for her daughter, whom I had found abandoned. And why didn't you turn the child over to authorities immediately? Because I wanted to make sure she'd be well cared for, and because the mother showed up claiming her. Don't you think a situation where a single man lives with an underage girl could be considered inappropriate? I think a situation where a young mother is forced to abandon her own child is inappropriate. What I'm doing is offering help so she can care for her baby. The interview continued for another hour, with questions that seemed designed to create a negative narrative of the situation. After the social worker left, Robert and Jessica sat on the porch, both emotionally exhausted. They're going to recommend taking Hope away, Jessica said, tears in her eyes. Not necessarily, but we need to be prepared for that possibility. Robert, about what we talked about last week. Jessica, are you sure this is what you want? Not just as a solution to our problems, but truly. Jessica stayed silent for a moment, watching Hope sleeping in her arms. These last few weeks have been the happiest of my life, she finally said. Not just because I'm with Hope, but because for the first time I feel like part of a real family. A family where there's love, respect, and mutual support. But you're so young. You have your whole life ahead of you. And I want to live that life here, with you and Hope, if you'll have me." Robert looked at the young woman who had become so important in his life. In just a few weeks, she had brought life and purpose back to his existence. And hope. Hope had become the daughter he and Emily had never been able to have. "We need to talk about a few things first," he said. "Expectations, boundaries, the future. Does that mean you're considering it?" "It means you deserve an honest and thoughtful answer." That night, Robert stayed up late thinking about Jessica's proposal. It was a decision that would affect 3 lives: his, hers, and most of all, Hope's. By morning, his decision was made for him when he found William Thompson waiting at the entrance of his property, accompanied by the social worker and 2 police officers Robert didn't recognize. "Robert James Wilson," the social worker said formally. "We have a court order to remove the minor Jessica Thompson from this property and place the child in proper care." Robert's heart stopped. It was exactly what he had feared would happen. "On what grounds?" he asked. "On the grounds that a single man living with an underage girl creates a risky situation for both," William replied with evident satisfaction. "I'm an adult," said Jessica, appearing on the porch with Hope in her arms. "I turn 18 today." The silence that followed was tense. William clearly hadn't remembered his daughter's birthday. "Even so," said the social worker, "the child's situation still needs to be evaluated." "Then evaluate it," said a firm voice behind Robert. Everyone turned to see Mrs. Williams walking toward the group, followed by Dr. Michael, Sergeant Sullivan, and several other townspeople. "Margaret, this isn't your business," said William, visibly annoyed by the presence of witnesses. "William Thompson," Margaret replied firmly. "It is my business. I brought this child into the world, and I won't allow her to be separated from her mother because of your wounded pride." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about a man who forced his own daughter to hide a pregnancy, give birth alone, and then tried to make her abandon the baby. And now he wants to destroy the family she managed to build." "These are serious accusations," said the social worker. "They're true accusations," Dr. Michael countered. "And we have witnesses to all of it." William realized he was losing control of the situation again. The townspeople's presence was turning what should have been a discreet removal into yet another public spectacle. "Social worker," said Sergeant Sullivan, "may I see the court order?" The woman hesitated before handing over the document. The sergeant examined it carefully. "This order is based on a report of a minor in a risky situation," he said. "But the minor in question is now legally an adult, so the order is no longer valid." "What about the child?" asked the social worker. "The child is with her biological mother, who shows she can care for her and is receiving proper support. I don't see any risk here." William was furious. "Sergeant, you're overstepping your authority." "Mayor, I'm just applying the law correctly, something you should know how to do." The tension was rising when Robert made a decision that surprised everyone. "Social worker," he said, "I'd like to make a formal statement." "What kind of statement?" "I declare that I intend to marry Jessica Thompson and legally adopt her daughter." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Jessica seemed stunned by the public and definitive declaration. "Robert," she whispered, "are you sure?" "I am," he answered, looking into her eyes. "If you still want to." The tears in Jessica's eyes were answer enough. "This is ridiculous," William exploded. "William E., you can't marry my daughter just to obstruct justice." "It's not to obstruct anything," Robert replied calmly. "It's because I love this family that formed in my home, and I'll protect it in any way necessary." "Jessica," William said, trying one last approach, "you can't be serious. You've known him for less than a month." "Dad," Jessica answered firmly, "I've gotten to know him better in a month than I knew you in 17 years. He respected me, supported me, and loved my daughter without asking for anything in return. That's more than you ever did." Jessica's words hit William like a slap. For the first time, he seemed genuinely hurt, not just angry. "Social worker," Dr. Michael said, "considering the child's mother is now an adult, employed, has proper family support, and is making responsible decisions about her future, I see no basis for any intervention." The social worker looked around, realizing she was in a politically complicated situation. On one side was a mayor clearly abusing his position, and on the other was an entire community supporting a family that had formed unconventionally but with obvious love. "I'll need to make a full report about the situation," she finally said. "But based on what I observed today, there's no immediate indication of risk to the child." William realized he had definitively lost. His last attempt had failed, and now he faced the public humiliation of seeing his daughter openly choose a new family. "This isn't over," he said, trying to maintain some dignity as he walked to his car. "For me it is," replied Jessica. "I've chosen my family, and it's not you." After everyone had left, Robert and Jessica stood alone on the porch with Hope. "Do you really want to marry me?" Jessica asked. "I do, but we need to talk about what our life together will look like." "What do you mean?" "Jessica, I still love Emily. I probably always will. I can't promise you'll have all of my heart. Robert, I don't want to replace Emily. I want to build something new with you, something based on the respect and affection we already have, and the love we both feel for Hope. And are you ready for that? For a marriage that might not be traditional? I'm ready for a family built on real love, even if it's different from what people expect." Robert smiled, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. "Then let's get married." Robert and Jessica's wedding took place 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the local church. Half the town attended, showing support for the couple who had faced so much hardship. William and Barbara didn't come, but their absence was more noticed than missed. The community had chosen sides, and most stood with the new family. Mrs. Williams was Jessica's matron of honor, and Dr. Michael was Robert's best man. Sergeant Sullivan was present as a guest of honor, and even some of the merchants who had been pressured by William showed up to offer their support. During the ceremony, Hope slept peacefully in Mrs. Williams' arms, as if she knew this was an important moment for her family. "Robert James Wilson," said the priest, "do you take Jessica to be your wife, to love and cherish, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Robert answered, looking into Jessica's eyes. "Jessica Thompson," the priest continued, "do you take Robert James to be your husband, to love and cherish, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Jessica replied, her voice steady and emotional. "Then by the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The kiss that sealed their marriage was gentle and respectful, yet full of promise and commitment. After the ceremony, a small celebration was held at Robert's property, now officially the Wilson family home. Neighbors brought food, drinks, and most of all, joy. "Mrs. Wilson," Dr. Michael said to Jessica, "how do you feel?" "I feel at home," she answered, smiling. "For the first time in my life, truly at home." In the months that followed, the family settled into a happy and productive routine. Jessica finished high school and began a technical course in farm management, planning to help Robert expand their property. Hope grew up healthy and cheerful, surrounded by love and attention. Max had become her personal guardian, never straying too far from the child. William Thompson, defeated both politically and personally, announced he wouldn't run for re-election. The scandal had irreparably damaged his reputation, and he knew he no longer had the community's support. Barbara, surprisingly, began discreetly visiting the property, always when William wasn't around. At first, Jessica was cold toward her mother, but she gradually allowed her to get to know her granddaughter. "I regret everything," Barbara said during one of those visits. "I let pride and concern for appearances destroy my relationship with you." "Mother," replied Jessica, "I can't forget what happened, but I can try to forgive, especially because of Hope. She deserves to know her grandmother." The reconciliation between Jessica and Barbara was slow and careful, but genuine. Robert supported the process, understanding the importance of Hope having healthy family connections. William, on the other hand, maintained his stance of distance and resentment. He never accepted the situation and avoided any contact with the new family. A year after the wedding, Jessica gave birth to another child, a boy named Charlie, in honor of Robert's grandfather. The family was now complete, and the property echoed once more with children's laughter and voices. "Do you regret anything?" Jessica asked Robert one evening as they watched the children playing in the yard. "What could I possibly regret?" he replied. "You brought life back to my home and my heart." Even knowing our story began so dramatically. Especially because of that, the best stories always start with adversity. Jessica smiled and nestled into her husband's arm. "Do you think Hope will understand our story when she grows up?" "I think she'll understand that she was deeply loved from her very first day, and that her mother was brave enough to fight for her. And that she found a father who loved her even before she was born," Jessica added. That night, as Robert made his final rounds around the property before bed, he stopped at the old well where it had all begun. The spot had been transformed into a flower garden with a small bench where the family often sat on warm afternoons. Max approached and sat beside Robert, the two of them gazing at the illuminated house where their family rested. "Thank you, boy," Robert said, stroking the dog who had saved not just a child, but an entire family. "You knew from the very beginning, didn't you?" Max simply wagged his tail, as if agreeing that he had always known that cry from the well would change everything for the better. 5 years later, Robert's property had become one of the most prosperous in the region. Jessica had earned a degree in farm management and applied modern techniques that significantly increased productivity. Hope, now a bright and cheerful 5-year-old girl, ran through the fields with Max, who despite his age still served as a protective guardian. Charlie had become a curious and adventurous 3-year-old boy. The family had grown not just in number, but in love and prosperity. Robert had found not just a second chance at happiness, but a different and perhaps even deeper happiness than before. One Sunday afternoon, as the family lunched on the porch, an unfamiliar car approached the house. A young woman with a small child in her arms stepped out. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly. "I'm looking for Robert Wilson." "That's me," Robert replied, standing. "My name is Sarah. I heard your story in the neighboring town. My situation is similar to Mrs. Thompson's a few years ago." Robert and Jessica exchanged understanding glances. "Come in," Jessica said kindly. "Let's talk." As Sarah told her story, a young mother rejected by her family for a pregnancy out of wedlock, Robert realized the cycle was repeating. Not exactly the same way, but with the same basic needs: love, acceptance, and a chance to start over. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Jessica asked. "Not really. That's why I came to you. I heard that you'd understand." "We do," Robert said, "and we have a guest room available if you'd like to stay until you get settled." Sarah began to cry with relief. "You'd do this for a stranger?" "No one is a stranger when they need help," replied Jessica, "especially a mother with a child." That night, as Sarah settled into the guest room with her 2-year-old daughter, Robert and Jessica talked about how their lives had become a refuge for people in difficult situations. "Do you think we're turning into an unofficial foster home?" Jessica asked, smiling. "Would that be so bad?" Robert replied. "We have the space, we have the experience, and most importantly, we understand what these people are going through. It wouldn't be bad at all. It would be a way to give back all the help we've received. And it would be a way to teach our children the value of compassion and solidarity." Over the following years, Robert and Jessica's property became informally known as a place where struggling young mothers could find temporary support. It wasn't an official institution, but a network of help built on personal experience and genuine understanding. Some stayed just a few weeks until they got back on their feet. Others remained for months, contributing to the farm work while rebuilding their lives. Everyone left stronger and more independent than when they arrived. Hope and Charlie grew up in this environment of solidarity and acceptance, naturally understanding that families can be formed in many different ways, and that love isn't limited by blood ties. "Daddy," Hope asked one day when she was 8, "why do some moms come to live here with their babies?" "Because sometimes families don't understand what unconditional love means," Robert explained, "and these mothers need a place where they can learn to be strong and independent." "Like Mommy learned here?" "Exactly like Mommy learned here. And you? Did you learn anything too?" Robert smiled, recognizing his daughter's insight. I learned that a life can change completely when you open your heart to the unexpected. Like when Max found Mommy in the well. Like when Max led me to the well where you were waiting to change our lives. 10 years after that morning when Max had barked desperately, Robert stood once again by the well, now transformed into a memorial garden. But this time, he wasn't alone. Jessica was by his side, watching Hope play with Charlie and 2 other children, whose mothers were temporarily staying with them. "Do you regret anything?" Jessica asked, repeating the question she had asked years before. "I regret not having met you sooner," Robert answered, gently kissing his wife's forehead. "Don't say that. If we had met earlier, maybe we wouldn't appreciate what we have now." "True. Sometimes you have to go through pain to recognize joy. And sometimes you have to lose one family to find an even better one." Hope came running up with Max, now much slower but still devoted, trotting behind her. "Daddy, Mommy, Max is showing me where he found me." "Is that so?" Robert said, kneeling to be at his daughter's eye level. "He said he knew from the very first moment that I was special." "And he was right," Jessica said, scooping Hope into her arms. "You were and always will be our special little one. And Charlie too. And Charlie too. And all the children who come through our home. Because we're a family that helps other families?" "Exactly," Robert replied. "Because we know how important it is to have a family that truly loves you." That night, after all the children were asleep, Robert and Jessica sat on the porch, watching the stars. The property was quiet, but it was a silence full of life and contentment. "Robert," Jessica said, "thank you." "For what?" "For having the courage to open your home, your heart, and your life to me. Because he was the father Hope needed even before she was born. Because he built with me something I didn't even know was possible." "Emily, I should be the one thanking you. You gave me back my life. You taught me it's possible to love again without betraying the past. You gave me the family I thought I'd never have. We saved each other." "We and Max," added Robert, laughing. "Especially Max. Without him, none of this would have happened." As if he'd heard his name, Max appeared on the porch, slower than before but still watchful. He lay at the couple's feet, fulfilling his eternal role as guardian of the family he'd helped create. "Do you think he knew?" asked Emily. "From the very beginning, do you think he knew a child in that well would change everything?" "I think he knew a life was in danger and needed saving. The rest was fate's doing. Or love's doing. Love has a way of finding its path, even in the most unlikely circumstances." Robert silently agreed, thinking of all the coincidences that had aligned to bring his family together, the perfect timing, the right people appearing at the right moment, the courage everyone found when they needed it most. "You know what amazes me the most," he said. "What?" "How our story became the story of so many others. How many families formed here, how many mothers found strength, how many children found love. It's as if that well became a fountain of second chances for all of us." 15 years after that fateful morning, Robert was back in the garden that had replaced the well, now a grandfather to 3 grandchildren, Hope's children, who had married a young man from a nearby town and lived in a house built on the property. Charlie had graduated as a veterinarian and worked with Dr. Michael, who was already considering retirement. The tradition of caring for animals would continue in the family. The property had expanded significantly, not just in size but in purpose. It was now officially registered as a family support farm, offering training programs for young mothers and their children. Emily had become a regional leader in family support programs, speaking at universities and conferences about community-based social care models. Max had passed 2 years earlier, but his lineage lived on through his children and grandchildren, who carried on the tradition of being the family's special guardians. On that particular day, Robert was in the garden because it was Hope's 15th birthday. 15 years since the morning she had been found in the well. The whole family had gathered for the celebration. Emily, now a respected and mature woman in the community, Hope, married and a mother of 3, Charlie, a dedicated young veterinarian, and many of the temporary daughters who had passed through the property over the years and stayed in touch as part of the extended family. "Grandpa Robert," said the eldest granddaughter, 7 years old, "tell us again how Mommy was found in the well." "Again?" Robert laughed. You all know this story by heart. But we love hearing you tell it. Robert looked around at all the eager faces, grandchildren, temporary children, visitors, and realized the story had become more than just a personal memory. It had become a symbol of hope and transformation. All right, he said, sitting on the stone bench beside the garden. It was a cold morning in Lake Tahoe, and I had been alone for 5 years since your great-grandmother Emily had passed. As he told the story once more, Robert watched the reactions of those listening. For some, it was a familiar tale of overcoming. For others, especially the young mothers who were temporarily staying on the property, it was a source of hope that their own circumstances could change. And then, Robert continued, reaching the climax of the story, Max led me to the well and there was a bundle of blankets. When I looked inside, I saw the most beautiful child in the world who would change my life forever. And our lives too, the grandchildren shouted in unison, making everyone laugh. And all of our lives, Robert agreed. Because when a family is built with true love, that love multiplies and touches so many other lives. After the celebration, when most of the guests had left, Robert and Jessica stood alone in the garden, watching the sun set over the property that had become so much more than they ever imagined. Are you happy? Jessica asked, a question that had become a ritual between them over the years. I am whole, Robert replied, using the word that best described what he felt. And you? I'm grateful. Grateful for the courage I had to leave Hope where I knew she would be loved. Grateful for your generosity in opening your life to us. Grateful for everything we've built together. You know what amazes me most after all these years? What? How a desperate decision by a frightened young woman turned into something so big. How the act of leaving a child in a well became, in truth, the act of giving her to love. Because sometimes we have to let go for the right things to happen. And sometimes we have to be ready to receive the unexpected. As they walked back to the house, Robert paused once more by the memorial garden. You know what moves me most about this whole story? Tell me. It's that it hasn't ended. Every child born here, every family that forms, every second chance we offer, it's the continuation of our story. It's proof that true love doesn't just change lives. It creates a legacy that keeps multiplying. Like ripples in a lake when you toss a stone. Exactly. And it all started with the desperate barks of a dog and the courage of a young woman who chose love over fear. 20 years later, Robert sat on the same porch where so many important conversations had taken place, though now his hair was completely white and a cane rested beside his chair. Jessica, still vibrant at 38, ran the farm's programs with the help of Hope and Charlie. The property had become a model studied in universities, and delegations from other towns regularly visited to learn about the community-based family support project that had grown from one desperate personal situation. Grandpa, said his 5-year-old great-grandson, the child of one of his grandchildren, are you sad? Why do you ask, little one? Because you were looking at that garden with a sad face. Robert smiled, realizing the boy had mistaken his thoughtful expression for sorrow. I'm not sad, my dear. I'm remembering. Remembering what? Remembering how it all began. How your great-grandmother Hope came into our family. Tell it again. Again. But you already know the story. But I like it, and I want to tell it to my kids when I grow up. In that moment, Robert realized the story had become more than a family memory. It had become a tradition, a way to teach about love, acceptance, and the importance of opening your heart to the unexpected. All right, he said, settling the boy onto his lap. Once upon a time, there was a lonely man who lived on a farm, and he had a very clever dog named Max. As he told the story once more, Robert looked through the window at all the activity on the property, young mothers caring for their children while learning new skills, children playing in the gardens, volunteers helping with various projects. All of that had begun from a moment of despair, turned into love. The end of the story. Now tell us what you thought of this touching story. Do you believe Robert made the right decision by opening his home and heart to Jessica and Hope? Share your honest thoughts in the comments with heartfelt words. Can situations like this really happen in real life? We'd love to hear what you think. Don't forget to leave a like if the story moved you. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories like this one.